I'm ready.
Ready.
Okay, this is Addy Ads, and welcome to another edition of Addy Chats. I am here with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. The Oppenheimer Ranch Project is an experiment in high alpine sustainability with the goal to transform over 50 acres of high alpine wilderness into an off-grid, self-sustaining homestead. An Earthship residence will be one of the many alternative construction styles they will be utilizing in their organically grown permaculture farm. They're currently living inside a trailer inside the massive workshop house that they're currently building as well. Geothermal greenhouses are also being integrated into all into all designs. They also describe themselves as two humans who no longer support the inhuman oligarchic empire model, destroying our planet and our true nature as human beings. As activists, they decided to do something about it, so they opted out of their former lives to begin anew. Currently, they are transforming an alpine wilderness into a self-sustaining homestead, an organic farm in preparation for the upcoming collapse. They plan on developing and executing every single step of the process in open source format. Give me one sec here. In open source format for the benefit of all humanity. They have backgrounds in academia and the sciences, including climatology, geology, physics, biology, chemistry, and more. And they hope to uncover the lies perpetuated by the mass media. You can keep up with them on their website or their Facebook page as well. And I will put those links in the description box, of course. And the two people behind Oppenheimer Ranch Project are Leah Sharper and David Mauriello. Leah spent 2 decades in Philadelphia after growing up in New York. She earned her bachelor's degree in philosophy of science and physics at the University of Penn and later studied biomedical writing and ethics at the University of the Sciences. She has worked as a writer and researcher in science history and policy and arts advocacy, and is an intermittent writer of poetry and narrative nonfiction. Long dreaming of a life in which the body and mind is fully invested in the act of living itself, her passions for sustainability, food sovereignty, and resourceful homesteading find their home at Oppenheimer Ranch. The other half of Oppenheimer Ranch is David Mauriello. David, otherwise known as Diamond, grew up in Southampton, just outside of Philadelphia. He attended Temple University, where he received his BS in geology and stayed on to teach and get his master's degree. His recent work on social and environmental justice initiatives, including urban vacant lot farming, GMO awareness, and other green endeavors, find even greater expression in the Oppenheimer Ranch Project. He has an extensive background in landscape, residential, and commercial construction, and is also a master dry set mason, skills which fit nicely with the tasks at hand. David and Leah, thank you for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
No problem.
By the way, my last name is actually Shaper. My last name is Shaper, not Sharper.
Oh, Shaper. Excuse me. Okay. Thanks for the correction. Let me fix my green screen.
Sure.
It's quick here right now. I don't know what's going on. We'll have a nice green background for me. How's that? But if you guys want to just go into, if you guys just want to go into your backgrounds and kind of what was the genesis of this anecdotally from your point of view? Because I think what's quite fascinating and impressive to me is the fact that you guys actually didn't start this that long ago. So if you guys want to go into that.
Well, I'll just quick say about 6 years ago we met through activism. So I'd been working on the March Against Monsanto. She was doing some activism against the Fed, I believe, and some libertarian stuff. And we met that way in Philly, and we kind of both had very similar ideas. She had the idea to homestead in New England, and my idea was to come out to the Four Corners region. So that's how it started, and we just started talking about it. You want to go from there?
Yeah, I mean, especially with all of the activism being anti-GMO, so Diamond organized the first March Against Monsanto in Philadelphia, and we had that interest in common. And like he said, I had been looking to buy land and homestead in the Northeast for a long time, and I had been looking around for land, and I never really found what I was looking for. Pennsylvania was never an option because the water, there's fracking everywhere in Pennsylvania, so that was never an option to me. And I just never quite found what I was looking for, nor the right person to do this with. And then, lo and behold, we met and had all of these interests in common and started developing this plan and talking and dreaming. And we came out to Colorado and just, drove around the state and got an idea about what we'd like, found a lot that we thought would be perfect. And that's how we kind of got started with this.
Wow.
So.
And I noticed on the Google Maps that you guys are actually almost like completely surrounded by that. Is it a national park or a state park there?
National Forest.
Wow.
National Forest.
And how was it acclimatizing?
When we,
go ahead.
Well, acclimatizing took years. Yeah, it took years to acclimatize. We have two separate parcels. We have one up very high, and we have one down lower that we're talking to you from right here. Where we're sitting down here is 6,600 feet, and it's the Three Canyons Permaculture Farm. And the initial parcel that Leah bought was up higher here. That's Oppenheimer Ranch. Frank Oppenheimer actually used to own the ranch. And this all came about upon our initial discussions about the project itself. So we want to go to homestead in a place that has clean water, that's safe from the masses in case of any eventuality. We're talking like Yellowstone going off, or some scale of catastrophe like that, to a financial collapse, or even a pandemic like we're living right now. So we're in a position where there are very few people around us for hundreds of miles. And really, we're living in a bubble here. But at the same time, it has the highest concentration of wildlife. There's over 40 million elk that migrate through this area. There are thousands of high alpine lakes and streams filled with trout that have never been poisoned by chemicals or anything like that. And we're living in a valley that is protected from fracking, from oil and gas. Most of the water in this valley is disgusting because we're right on both sides is the Manco Shale, which they do frack all over New Mexico. But the gas is actually leaking out, into the air here, so they can't pump it out. And if you're in the very bottom of the valley, you have a glacial fill because we're only 14 miles from the Continental Divide. So if you can tap into that gravel, you have unlimited glacial water that's pristine. So, these are the things we looked into. And then when we started searching around the U.S., this was the only place we could find that met all that criteria, that we were safe from the masses. We're talking hours away from any city. Like if it was a grid down thing and there was limited fuel or whatever, nobody's coming out here because you wouldn't waste all your fuel and energy to get here. Literally, it's 6 hours from Denver. If you call Farmington a city, that's over 2 hours away, and that's about it.
And Durango's an hour and a half from where we are.
Okay.
Yes, very close to New Mexico.
Yeah, we're about 12 miles from the state line, 20 miles south of Pagosa Springs.
So we really did a complete about face, like you said, I grew up in New York and Diamond grew up in Philadelphia, and then I lived in Philadelphia. So we lived in maximum, human population density for all of our lives, and then shifted it completely to be where there's very few people, and it's awesome. And the people that we do have, let's say in this valley here where Three Canyons is, many of them are doing similar kinds of things. They're growing their own food. They're raising goats. Whatever it is that they're into, So we always have people that we can trade product with. You know, we can trade eggs for goat milk, which is fantastic because it means we have a community of people that we can work with here in the event of catastrophe. So.
And is that something
If Scott
you
ever milks his
do
goats.
regularly? You barter instead of use money?
Sometimes, yeah. And I think we'll probably do that more. The more that other people move away from the monetary system, or if the system collapses, which it probably will at some point, I imagine we'll be doing a lot more of that. A lot of people around here are interested in trading over cash.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we're allowed to grow cannabis. So that is very, very, lucrative tradable, because if you can grow a few pounds of high quality cannabis, a lot of your neighbors can't do that. They don't know how to. They fail at it, or they just don't do it, and it's a very good option for trading in a legal state. So it's a very high value crop.
And what's the limit on that for growing?
Well, it depends on how good you are. You're allowed to have 3 flowering plants per person per parcel, and so if you're good, like my one neighbor down the road here. Last year, in the beginning of the season, he showed me his plants. They were already like 11 feet tall. So he had 3, and he's about to move outside. So it depends on how hard you work, what kind of quantity you can get. I mean, you could literally grow thousands of dollars worth of cannabis legally per person annually.
Wow, that's crazy. You guys think in such a different way from most people that you would meet, especially in the Western world. And I just wanted to unpack a couple things that you mentioned earlier. First off, I didn't even know there were elk in Colorado, that many, which is crazy. And is Frank Oppenheimer related to the atomic bomb Oppenheimer?
Yes, he is. Frank Oppenheimer is Robert Oppenheimer's brother. They both worked at Los Alamos. They both worked on the bomb. Frank Oppenheimer was one of the first people to really understand what cosmic rays are, which is very interesting because one of the things that we're preparing for is grand solar minimum, which means that cosmic rays will be much higher. They already are higher than they normally are. But yes, both Frank and Robert experienced some blacklisting from their academic communities. Frank, as an example, had joined the Communist Party. And so he got a lot of flack from that. He was kind of blacklisted from his career. He came out to Colorado because Robert had property down by Los Alamos, and came out here and was, raising cattle. And he kind of said, screw all of that, because his career was almost completely ruined. He ended up teaching physics here in the high school. And there are still people here, older ladies in particular, who remember Robert Oppenheimer being here teaching physics, and they thought he was, Frank, and they thought he was amazing. So here's like this weird New York guy, essentially, with like a tie, and he's an academic, and he moves out to Colorado, and he's like a fish out of water, and initially people treat him with suspicion, but he ends up being quite a favorite around here. So it just so happens that the first lot that I bought was Frank's, and that's a pretty cool piece of history.
Yeah, and we were kind of unaware of it. It just happened to meet all the criteria of the resources on the land. There's millions of board feet of lumber and huge old growth forests. Multiple drainages come together, and we have a river in the bottom of the valley that's up at Oppenheimer Ranch. The river is only 4 miles from the Continental Divide at that point. So you can literally drink the water directly from the river. You don't even need to filter it. And the irony was, when we found the spot, we then found out it was Frank Oppenheimer's, and we looked into him, and it was like, wow, it was just an uncanny accident.
Yeah, it was almost like we followed a similar path in a certain way. And yeah, just very, very cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very coincidental. Yeah, and it does seem like you guys followed similar, maybe not similar paths, but similar destinations, right? And ending up in that same direction. So we do got some people tuning in from Seattle, so that is cool. But a couple more things I wanted to go over. and I know this is really basic for you guys, but there are some people who don't know what Monsanto is. Could you just briefly describe Monsanto?
Well, Monsanto is now Bayer, and this is interesting. Bayer makes aspirin. Everyone knows that. But Monsanto in 1901 was the first chemical company to patent aspirin. So Monsanto and Bayer are basically the same exact corporation. And Monsanto has egregiously been one of the largest multinational corporations to kill the most amount of people. And Monsanto Bayer came together during the Second World War and then in Vietnam to create Agent Orange and other disgusting things, which killed tens of thousands, if not millions of people. And then sometime in the 70s and 80s, because they had all these leftover bioweapons from all the wars, they decided to go into agriculture and to repurpose these chemicals for human consumption. And part of that is aspartame or aspartame, however you want to say it, which is in every single product as an artificial sweetener. This was a biological weapon that someone accidentally tasted. And then they tested the efficacy of it, if they could reduce the amount that goes in a product, because its sweetness value is very high. And then the FDA, who's also part of the whole cabal of governments and the corporate revolving door, the FDA approved these biological weapons for human consumption in certain amounts. And now we have genetically modified organisms, and CRISPR vegetables. The list goes on. It's completely insane that the largest chemical companies, which kill the most people, they've even poisoned towns. I mean, back in the 50s, on purpose, because these are they're now in control of the food supply. So once we were aware that the food supply and GMOs were going to be rolling forward, we started the March Against Monsanto because the public needed to be informed what they were getting into and what they were actually being sold in the supermarket. We still don't know if genetically modified foods are safe for human consumption because no long-term studies have been done. But in the 10 or 15 years since the initiation of GMOs into the food supply, we know that the increase in celiac disease and autism and all kind of inflammatory spectrum diseases has skyrocketed at the same time. And so a lot of people say that, correlation is not causation, but what is your explanation for what's going on?
Yeah, right. And what year was that march against Monsanto in Philly?
First one? Probably
2012?
I was going to say 2011.
Yeah,
probably
somewhere around there.
I think it was 2011. Yeah.
Okay.
It was right after the Occupy movement.
Okay, got you. And as far as the name goes, you guys just wanted to keep Oppenheimer?
Yeah, no, just kind of keep that legacy alive. It's kind of weird because in one way we're associating ourselves with somebody who helped create the bomb, but he didn't like what he had produced. The way the man thought was clearly not towards destruction. That's not what he was interested in. So we definitely decided to keep it alive. Yeah,
and in fact, the second half of Oppenheimer's life, after he came to Pagosa, he was famous for starting the first Please Touch museum called the Imaginarium in San Francisco, I believe, which is still in operation today. And now every single city across the entire United States has that type of interactive science touch museum. So he invented that. And so clearly he wanted to help people learn about science. That was his mission.
I did not know
There's
that
a
he invented
wonderful there's a wonderful biography of Frank Oppenheimer called Something Wonderful Happens. It's written by Casey Cole, and a lot of it is focused on the development of that museum. It's a pretty fascinating read.
Thank you for that book recommendation. I'm always looking for new book recommendations, and I think a lot of the people who view me are as well. And I do recall my science teacher in high school, who was probably the smartest teacher I ever had. A physics teacher, and he was my freshman year and then junior year teacher. He taught us about Oppenheimer and just a little bit about how he got, completely blackballed and just basically used, for his talents to make the bomb. But especially after the fact, in terms of how the government and academia treated him. But let's move on a bit. You mentioned a glacial fill. I actually don't know what that is, and some people who listen probably don't as well. What's a glacial fill?
Well, if you were around on Earth around 16,000 years ago, you would have been alive during the last peak of the last ice age, called the Wisconsinian, where somewhere in New York there was 5 miles of ice. And here in the Rocky Mountains, there were huge glacial fields on the Continental Divide. And so these valleys are all filled with glacial till. Massive melt-off occurred around the Younger Dryas event, which is around 12,700 years ago. And these huge floods occurred all over the world. And so the valleys that are associated with any of these glacial regions, like the entire state of Michigan, is glacial till. If you dig anywhere, it's just rounded cobbles. It looks like river cobbles. These are glacial pebbles that were deposited during the last glaciation. So the entire valley fill, which is, I don't know, what is that, a quarter mile across?
Yeah.
A quarter mile across the valley is flat. If you dig down 20 feet, you have river jacks, unlimited river jacks, and there is a river flowing underground there, which is coming from the Continental Divide. So even in the summer, that glacial water is locked underground and flowing underground right by us.
Wow, that is so interesting. And is that how Wisconsin got its name then, from that that time period?
Yeah, absolutely. Wisconsin was completely underneath the ice sheet, and when it receded, the state itself has all the amazing glacial features you would see in a glacial field. It has eskers and drummonds and all kinds of things. End moraines, which are just these huge walls of gravel that drop off the edge of a melting glacier. So Wisconsin is, well, the Wisconsinian at the time was named from the features geologically found in Wisconsin by a geologist. So they named it after all the glacial features in the state.
Okay. Wow, that is very interesting. And I'm asking because I'm actually from Wisconsin, and there was 2 other terms in there you used that you said you view in Wisconsin. Could you define those as well?
Drumlins and eskers, these are just weird features that are erosional and sedimentary features from the process of glaciers moving across the surface. So an end moraine, like I said, is when a glacier stops moving forward. When it stops moving forward and starts receding, it starts dropping out all of the pebbles that it has accumulated. And in the very beginning, you get what's called the end moraine, and then it backs up. Now, everything as it backs up, you get these plucks, these glacial plucks, if it pulls out a big rock, and then you can get these, they're called pockmarks. So you'll get all these little lakes that are called eskers, like the Finger Lakes, and isn't Michigan called like the Thousand Lakes, or Minnesota? Those are all glacial lakes,
yeah.
The land of 1,000 lakes. Yeah, so that's all glacial related. And a drumlin is a weird shaped hill, which is like a sand dune made by a glacier, if you can believe that.
Wow, that's really interesting stuff, and my viewers are definitely liking it. What are you guys' thoughts? Because we mentioned it at the beginning, but I would very much like to know what you guys think about the situation we find ourselves in now. I know it's not really affecting you guys that much, and we can get into that too, as far as where you guys, if you guys even go down, because you guys are quite high up in the mountain, basically. Do you ever go down the mountain for anything? Or let's get into the pandemic a little bit, if that's okay.
Yeah, we're actually in the lowest spot in the area.
Yeah, we're in the lowest spot in all of southwestern Colorado, and the other half, this part of the ranch, is at the highest spot.
Yeah.
And Pagosa's in the middle.
Oh,
but we've been studying the pandemic since inception, and we've done dozens, if not hundreds, of videos on the topic on our YouTube channel. And Leah has delved into the literature like no one. In the very beginning, we came up with nutraceutical protocols for this particular virus.
Yeah. We worked a little bit with another person, Paul Cottrell, He is a medical student in New York, and so we've done some shows with him. And this sort of came out of collaborating with him, was developing a protocol of herbs that could be beneficial in the event of being infected with coronavirus. But you're right. I mean, we definitely live in a bubble here as far as coronavirus stuff, and that is not just because the population is low and we've had, I don't know, all of 8 infections in this county, but also we're in a bubble in terms of restrictions. You know, things have been fairly lax here. Yeah, people wear masks in the grocery store and Walmart, you know, but definitely a bubble here. We left the bubble recently to go to Albuquerque for a medical appointment, and that was kind of strange for us because Albuquerque, as of this past Saturday, has mandated, New Mexico has mandated that everybody has to wear a mask all the time. But as we discovered, even some of the physicians and nurses think this is stupid and pointless, and we would tend to agree with them. You know, there are some studies out there that show that masks don't really do anything to prevent the spread of this disease. So why is everybody being mandated to wear masks? It's a big question.
And is that because
and they're really hyping up the death toll number?
Contagious? It's just that virulent?
Well, one of the reasons cited for mask inefficacy is that the size of the virus particle is too small. So that unless it's an N95 mask, the virus particle can actually pass through the pores in the fabric or the paper material. So,
yeah. So if you learn about virology, spitting is not how you get the cold. The coronavirus or a cold, it's the same. Coronavirus, COVID-19 is a cold. It's a version of the cold. So get it out of your head. This is a cold. Everyone gets it. It spreads around easily. But the cold spreads from micro droplets. So this is when you cough and you have your mask on, the micro droplet is going to get through the mask. And that's the one that lingers in the air for 6 hours. And so you're going to breathe that in. So all the people with the mask on coughing and thinking they're helping other people, it's the micro droplet that you're going to breathe in. It's going to sit and then start replicating, not the spit. And even if you were to spit on a surface and I were to rub it and try to lick my hand, the odds of getting the coronavirus that way is very low because you have things like digestive juices and mouth acid. So the way this is spread is through micro droplets and breathing it. And we know that you just have to lock people on a ship and they all get it. So that's how contagious this is. It's super contagious. It's the cold. And so large portions of the population have been exposed already. The numbers are around 40% people that have it are asymptomatic, meaning they never know they have it. So they just spread it around to everyone else, who then 40% of which never know they have it. Now, the reason the death toll in the U.S. is around 100,000 is because Democratic governors mandated that sick old people be put into old age homes. And they wound up killing 50,000 elderly in old age homes by this stupid protocol. And had they not put sick people into old age homes, the death toll would probably be half. And we would expect a novel flu or cold coming out on the world. We expect 60,000 or more deaths in the U.S. because that's what happens every year during a new outbreak of a cold or a new flu virus.
Or influenza, for example, would do a similar kind of thing. So.
And so what we also learned is maybe even 20% of these numbers are padded. Anyone who dies with COVID-19 died of COVID-19. And we recently saw that in our state. Our death toll was 1,200 in our state until someone pointed out to our governor that these numbers are fake. And a lot of one native family whose son died from alcohol poisoning, they listed his death as COVID-19, and they were pissed.
This guy had a blood alcohol level of 0.55. He did not die from COVID-19. Oh. He died from alcohol poisoning.
Yeah, but on the death certificate it said COVID-19. So the next day they looked into it and they found 300 out of the 1,200 were bullshit. And those came off, and then we went back down to 800. So if this is happening in our state, it's happening in other states. It has to be. And it's happening in other countries. And so we all know what the purpose of this is, and we believe it's an agenda and the reason we moved out here. It's part of the globalist plan to tag you, bag you and tag you, give you an ID or a chip to, contact trace your every move, your every purchase, so that the government can suck every dollar out of you through taxes and so on and so forth. Plus, they can control who owns weapons, every single bullet, and on and on. And I'm sure the American people will not stand for this. They've been in a haze for a while, but there's a lot of people starting to wake up and kind of figuring out what's going on.
I want to throw out there too that, it's not like there is a reality where this virus can be dangerous to some people, right? If you have an underlying health condition or you're elderly, this is dangerous to you. And I'm speaking as someone who has a 74-year-old father who lives in New York, right outside New York City, in one of the highest concentrations of infection. So I worry about him. But that's just it. Never in our history have we quarantined an entire population. What we have always done is quarantine people who are sick when we have major outbreaks of disease, but we don't quarantine everybody. And that to me is the thing that says there's something wrong with this picture, that this is really about tracking and controlling the population as a whole, and less about that the disease is just an excuse for doing so.
Yeah, the majority of people who died from this disease are vitamin D deficient. And that means that they work indoors or they have dark skin. And so you need to be taking a vitamin D supplement if you have dark skin or you work indoors. The majority of people have this vitamin D deficiency, and they've locked us inside because they don't want us to go outside in the sun where you create vitamin D. So this just seems to be too deliberate to be anything else.
Thank you for that explanation, and we can definitely go deeper into that. But before we do that, could you just explain the old people incident a little more? What happened in the nursing homes, and did they send people who weren't originally in nursing homes into nursing homes?
This all began in Italy. So the first I don't know what the Lombardy, where the main outbreak is. If instead of sending sick old people to the hospital, they sent them to nursing homes where there were no sick people. And we now know this is highly infectious. So if you put a sick old person into a tiny nursing home and they cough or whatever, it's going to be aerosolized. It's going to go through the ducts and the vents, and everyone's going to get it. And the most at-risk people are elderly with comorbidity. And those are everyone in a nursing home. So they literally sent a seed bomb into every nursing home in Italy. And I think 70% of all deaths are in nursing homes in Italy. It's really tragic. And then a few weeks later, Governor Cuomo signed the same mandate in New York. I believe it's third week of March to do the same thing. They had also built field hospitals at the cost of millions, tens of millions of dollars that not a single patient went into. This is how off the experts were. And now the expert that shut down the whole world, he was caught smuggling in a married, his married, lover into his apartment over in the UK. And he got fired. He stepped down from the job, Neil Ferguson. He was the guy that claimed that 2 million deaths were going to occur in the US, this guy. So he is now out of the picture. He's the reason the world is shut down. And God knows whose idea it was to send sick COVID-19 people, which is a highly infectious disease, into nursing homes and kill all those people. The majority of deaths that we're seeing is from improper protocol, period.
What is their rationale for doing that, for sending sick old people into nursing homes? Have they given one at all?
Yeah, they didn't want to give sick old people ventilators, so they were basically a death sentence. They were just sending them to die. The only people that were getting ventilators in New York were the healthier patients because they had a limited amount. Now, the number of ventilators was never at zero. So it was all nonsense numbers. They never ran out of ventilators. Now they're making millions of ventilators at Ford. That's ridiculous.
Incidentally, about ventilators,
they're not even.
The ventilators are a problem as it is. One of the things that was discovered along the way is that the ventilators are causing such severe lung injury, which is a known factor with ventilators. That's a reality of using a ventilator. They cause lung injury. But in the face of this disease, it's particularly damaging. And the longer you're on the ventilator, the worse it is. Well, there are some physicians that figured out that the respiratory distress that people have been finding themselves in, it's not really a product of the lungs not working correctly. It's actually an issue with the blood. So I don't recall the exact mechanism, but essentially, if hemoglobin carries oxygen in your blood, it's like the hemoglobin factor is not functioning correctly. So people are like suffocating without even realizing that it's happening. You might have heard a few stories of like younger people who just like suddenly dropped dead. And that's probably why. They're probably suffocating in some way, but they don't realize that they're oxygen deprived because they're not actually having this respiratory distress. They're just not carrying enough oxygen in their blood.
Right.
So
The
that is
oxygen
really the issue.
saturation is too low. Right?
Yeah. And you can't saturate the blood with enough oxygen using a ventilator. It just can't work. A ventilator is not designed for that.
BPAP, the BPAP they can't use because and they can't use the right techniques and they use this as a protocol because it would spread the virus out from the patient. So the reason they decided to intubate everyone is because it's a closed loop in the system. There is no air escaping the lungs of the COVID intubated patient. Where in every other protocol, when you put an oxygen mask with high oxygen flow, they're breathing out of the side of the mask. So they didn't allow any of these techniques, and they in fact killed tens of thousands of people based on the protocol. I mean, we didn't have to do it this way. It's just wrong medicine, wrong medical protocol, a bunch of wrong predictions, billions of misappropriated dollars, and it goes on and on. And now our economy is tanked. And this is going to be a lasting effect. Everyone still has some money or some savings or whatever, maybe now, but in a few months from now, the trickle-down effect, the economy, the inflation, the hyperinflation, the lack of goods in major cities, just because they're not going to be able to have them. You know what I mean? Out here, not so much. We don't have that many people. So, I worry about what's coming.
Yeah, I do hope that we get the economy started as soon as possible. But shout out to Paul Cottrell, Dr. Cottrell. He actually was the person who notified me of you guys' channel. And he encouraged me to reach out to you. So yeah, shout out to Dr. Cottrell. And yeah, as far as the pandemic though, is there, because all of that is really interesting. And is there any more you guys have kind of observed as far as what has happened in the last few months?
There's so much.
Yeah, it's endless.
It is seemingly endless.
Yeah, and every day there's a new reveal. So it's like this has literally become a left-right issue on purpose. And now we're heading into an election. This is being used as a tool by both sides of the political arena. People that don't wear masks are getting shamed. And even I even saw a video where one woman who works at the CDC said, all we have to do is get rid of smart white people, and that problem will go away. So the higher ups, the elites, want everyone to have a mask on. They want everyone to be compliant. They think that in fact, the head of the CDC says smart people are the problem. And it's because they've read the literature and they know that masks don't do anything. And therefore why would I wear a mask if it's not going to do anything? That doesn't make any sense, because they want us to comply. They want us in a turnstile. They want us to put our ID in everywhere we go. Beep, beep, the retina scans. So everyone has to comply in order for that protocol to be going on, and the vaccines and so on and so forth.
Do you guys vote?
I was going to say that.
Go ahead, Leah.
I used to. I stopped.
Yeah.
I used to be adamant about voting. I don't think it makes a damn bit of difference anymore. I really don't. So I just stopped.
Yeah, and
I'll vote on the local level, but on the federal or even state level, I don't see the point. I really don't.
And I worked in political organizing. It has nothing to do with the candidate or the position. It has to do with the dollars in. You have the more money, you win on 98% of every election at every level. It's based on raised dollars, and it's not from the public. Over 80 and 90% of the money comes from political action groups and lobbyists. So the American people think they're donating to a political campaign. They're just throwing their money away. It's a complete waste of money and time. There is no democracy, in my opinion.
And this is something that I really didn't realize until recently, just the amount of power the American taxpayer has. Like, we, collectively, American taxpayers, they probably affect the world more than, anything else. When you see how much money is spent of Americans' money on weapons and war and stuff, in addition to what you just mentioned.
Yeah. It's sad because even on the most local level, like here's a short story. Many years ago, I worked for an organization called the Greater Philadelphia Cultural Alliance. So this was a organization that advocated for public funding for the arts, and that was basically my job. I was an advocate for public funding for the arts and good policy for the arts. The first year that I worked in that job in Philadelphia, we had a freshman councilwoman who was amazing. I mean, I worked with her a lot, and she just really got some amazing initiatives through and some good funding through, and it was just fantastic to work with her. Well, in the next year, everything changed, and it was all because of the political pressure that she was receiving, which in the case of Philadelphia was the mayor had a habit of, telling council people, essentially, you're with me or you're against me. And she was under enough pressure that she had to pick a side. And that ended up just, any honest or genuine motivation that she had to help the arts, it just went out the window. And it's like, I've seen that happen again and again and again and again and again. Somebody comes in that has great ideas. They genuinely want to do something. They really want to help the population get what they want. And then, the money and the pressure and the politics come in, and it's just all out the window and none of it matters. So it's just like, even on the local level, it's hard to find where the politics is even helpful in any way.
Could you explain that a little further? Because that's really interesting to me. Or like maybe show some examples that you've seen in your experience.
Well, that one example of the freshman council person who, faced pressure to, I feel like this is kind of how it happens a lot of the time. The person that has more political sway says, well, you have to be with me and join this agenda, and just forget about that stuff over there, because it doesn't make money for the state in any way. So if politicians are just, sorry, a little distracted by the dog, not interested in that particularly. If there's no money coming into the state or the city in that case. So not a tremendously good example, but
no, that's okay. I enjoyed it nonetheless. I was just wondering if you had multiple examples, was all, because of how you worded it. But you guys have a big project that is the Earthship. Jude. Oh wait, before we get to that though, there's another question of what David said earlier. What did you mean by Yellowstone going off? What does that mean?
Well, Yellowstone volcano. You haven't seen all the conspiracy theories of Yellowstone blowing. Yeah.
Okay. And before
any large geophysical catastrophe, safe spot here.
Okay, I gotcha. But yeah, do you guys want to talk about the Earthship a bit?
Well, we're not actually building one currently. Yeah, all the tires are right up on the hill over here, and there's a number of reasons, because we're initially going to build an Earthship, and then we found out about Earthships.
There's still an Earthship in our logo here. And we're really into the concept of Earthship.
Could you explain it?
They do have some issues. You want to explain the issues?
Well, so what we did was we came out here and we started noodling with different technologies, biotexture technologies, geothermal technology. And so the first thing we did was we set up a climate battery in a geothermal greenhouse. And we, based on what everyone's saying, that a climate battery is awesome, whatever, we tried that technique. And it wasn't as,
Okay.
all it was built up to be. So the whole climate battery idea was kind of a fizzle, and which is fine. That's why we're out here, to experiment. The true technology, what I kept seeing, and I've seen it for decades, is this old guy in Nebraska that has a citrus forest in his backyard that's connected to his house. Now he uses earth tube technology. This technology where you take tubes and you go beneath 6 feet in depth for hundreds of feet out and back in a closed loop. And what you can then harness from the earth is a constant 54-degree temperature. And this then makes your greenhouse or your house free. Heat, free air conditioning, free. Because to heat a house that's 54 degrees up to human temperature is basically you need a match. And then to cool a house, you just turn on the 54-degree air. So there's almost no heating and cooling with an earth tube. And then if you pump that into a greenhouse, you have a tropical greenhouse because it can never fall below 54 degrees. So instead of using the thermal mass idea, which is the climate battery idea, and then what's been happening in the last few decades, people have been living in Earthships and they're lighting fires in there, and they're not able to grow food in the Earthship itself. You can grow some herbs and plants in an Earthship, but you cannot grow food that's going to feed 50 people in an Earthship. You could grow the toppings on for 8 pizzas and maybe a cherry tomato, but it just doesn't work because, and so we redesigned the idea. So what we've incorporated into the structure we're sitting in here is, all types of thermal mass and heating and floor heating, different types, the exposure, and then the fact that we're putting on a 60-foot earth tube greenhouse with food production enough for 12 people that will actually grow food, just like our other geothermal.
And help heat our house.
And heat our house. So we're starting with the food first, and then we're going to utilize the heat and the cooling from there to heat the rest of the house. And then therefore you're going to actually get a system that works, one which you can live in an environment which you can also eat in. All year, you could be stuck and locked in here, and you could literally not have to leave ever, like a biodome.
And we have some very specific conditions here. Because we're up at altitude, we have very wide temperature swings from night to day. So what's average is 40 to 50 degrees different, but it can even be as much as 60 degrees. We can have a 30-degree night and hit a high of 90. And that's pretty normal. So, we're kind of, dealing with all of that. So I feel like it's giving us the opportunity to really refine these technologies. I mean, we also have some advantages in the sense that, there's 300 days of sun here a year. And we're up at altitude. So we're getting a lot of heat output from the sun. So, the fact that it's very warm during the day, even in the winter, even when there's lots of snow on the ground, that really helps us a lot too. But we're really pushing the limits, let's say, on earth tubes. And I think we're seeing that they can be successful even in climactic situation like this.
So
and we're still going to build an Earthship because we're going to do it.
Something you can live in and stay in. You don't have to leave, basically.
No, you would leave. You would leave.
But the idea of Earthship, the original idea was that it's something that captures all the water, grows all the food, and that's all you need. You don't need a supermarket. You literally have enough water storage that if it rains enough, you can capture unlimited amount of rainwater. And then using that and your gray water from your house, you can water your own produce and food and crops and everything and so it's a complete controlled system. But if you go out to the Earthship community in Taos, just south of here, you're not going to find a single person that has an Earthship that grows
everything
5% of the food that they eat. Yeah. 5%. And so that's just not what it should be doing. They do have passive solar homes that require very little electricity that stay relatively warm. And that's the charm of an Earthship. You can use trash and tires to make a really efficient thermal mass house. With a few solar panels, you're golden. And so that is really what came out of the Earthship movement. But what we're trying to do here is kick it up a notch where you can actually have all of your heating and cooling needs from the sun and from the earth itself. So we'll use the solar to power the fans in the earth tubes, which are then going to grow the food that we eat. And so basically, we're trying to be self-sufficient within the whole apparatus of the house itself.
You got to my next question. I was just about to ask about solar. What about wind? I'm guessing you guys make use of wind energy too.
Not at the moment, but we probably will.
Yeah.
I mean, and we have wind
wind
here. I mean, we have a windy season that is like drives you completely crazy because it never stops. So it's definitely something we can utilize. And we're in a valley where the wind kind of gets funneled like a wind tunnel. So we can definitely take advantage of that. We just haven't gotten there yet.
And we're in the sunniest place on earth with 305 sunny days a year. So it's not like Washington State where you need gigantic solar systems to be successful here. You can use a 5 kilowatt system and run a whole house. But what we have here is it's not installed yet, but we have 2 solar systems, a 14.5 kilowatt and a 5 kilowatt, which are going to be running both of the properties totally. So for a total of 19 kilowatts. And the reason we're doing it slowly is because the technology in batteries is shifting so quickly. When we first came out here, the Edison iron battery was really coming into the forefront, and the price in that has been dropping. And this is really the battery you want if you want to be off-grid solar, because it literally lasts a lifetime. Currently, with the lead, nickel, and acid batteries, you just throwing money and creating toxic waste every 8 to 10 years because the batteries are no good. But the Edison iron technology, obviously about 3 times more expensive currently, but those batteries use non-toxic electrolytes inside, like lemon juice, and they last forever. So that's the kind of battery technology we're leaning towards. It's almost there, so we're just about to get the solar and the system in and installed.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. And
I figure out what we want.
One thing I noticed about your homestead, based off your website, that really amazed me was the elevation change. I was just like, wow, how does that? I mean, not only are you're starting, I think it's 6,600 feet, but you go up another like 2,000 feet, right? So that was amazing, and I didn't know that about.
Well, wait.
So you guys live in a really unique area.
Yeah, there's actually a point of confusion in there. The website is really outdated. The land that's referred to on the website is the first lot that I bought, and that is up at 8,500 feet.
Frank.
That's the Frank Oppenheimer lot.
But the elevation goes from 7,100 to 9,200 there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So it's like on average it's 8,500. There is that is very mountainous. The topography is very challenging up there. Down here at Three Canyons, where we're averaging about 6,700, much flatter. We don't have that kind of topography down here.
But we do have 2 800-foot cliff walls because we're in the middle of 2 mesas.
Yeah.
So it's flat in the bottom and we actually do own one of the mountains that's right in front of us.
Yeah.
So we have a section of our front yard that in 1,000 feet, it goes up 1,000 feet.
It's just a cliff.
Yeah, it's a cliff. So we actually own a cliff that we stare at all day in the front yard.
That's cool. That's so awesome.
So you can hike up it, and then you get 5 bars at the top of your front yard. We actually have 5 bars up. It takes an hour to get there, but you can make a phone call.
That's awesome. And how did you guys meet?
Through activism, through similar social circles. I don't know, it was kind of like a slow introduction, and then, things just fell into place one day.
Yeah, on Facebook, like she commented on something I posted.
Yeah, it's like we knew each other not that well, and then we started having a conversation, and then we went out to dinner, and, it was just kind of like that.
And that was in Philly?
Yeah. It was tested.
In Philly, yeah.
Yep.
Awesome. And we are nearing up the end of the hour here as we reach 6 o'clock on the West Coast. Is there any, well, actually, I'm gonna, because I asked this of everybody, book recommendations? You guys got some good book recommendations right off the top of the head? Maybe
my
books
God.
that you've gifted to people. That's a good place to start.
Well, if you're into aliens, a friend of mine, Adrian D'Amico, just came out with a book called The Type 5. You probably very difficult to find it, but it talks about the impossibility of extraterrestrials flying around Earth and studying us, because it will blow your mind. I recommend you read the book. If you're into aliens, which I am, get the facts and think critically. Also, if you're into cosmic cycles, ancient man and ancient technology, which most people are, the book Hamlet's Mill, which is thousands of pages thick, by Von Deschen, and I'm forgetting the second author. But if you put in Hamlet's Mill, like Hamlet, Ham, the famous play. Was Hamlet a playwright?
Hamlet was the play.
He was
The
the
name of the
like the play.
play.
Okay. Yeah, that book is from the late 60s, and it will blow your mind. And it will take you your whole lifetime to read.
I have a completely random suggestion that just popped into my head. It's not necessarily, well, it is relevant because we are preparing for all possible catastrophes pretty much. Would be The Creature from Jekyll Island, about the Federal Reserve and how that was created. And it gives you the whole history of monetary systems, which is really fascinating because you realize that the regular common folk have been being ripped off for centuries and centuries and centuries by fractional banking. Absolutely fascinating read. Takes a while, real deep, lots of digging in there, but really great background knowledge on what it is that created this world that we live in, and the dynamics that are truly behind it.
Thank you guys for those suggestions. They sound really interesting, and I will definitely check them out. And I will try to put them in the description box as well, for the annotations when I go through the video later tonight. And I just wanted to thank you guys, David and Leah, for chatting with me today, taking time out of your Sunday night to chat with me. Do you guys have any final asks of the audience, or maybe if you want to invite them to check something out? Of course, I'll put all your links in the description box, but anything specific you guys are working on in the near future you want people to check out, or something like that?
I would just say check out our YouTube channel. Go over there, subscribe, check out some of the content. We cover a wide range of topics. We're up to date on the pandemic. I talk general news, crazy news across the U.S., basically on a daily basis, and other interesting topics that have to do with geology, ancient technology, and the like, space weather, etc. And if you're looking on investing in something during this changing time, I suggest you learn a new skill, and that's how to grow food and buy seeds. Long-term storing seeds and learning how to grow your own food could save yourself in a time that we're headed into.
Yeah, definitely check out the channel. We've also got, periodically have, stuff that's going on here at the ranch, the animals that we have here, the plants that we're growing, lots of, Diamond does lots of tips on, growing food and techniques for growing. So there's lots of educational content there to check out.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. This was David Mauriello and Leah Shaper with the Oppenheimer Ranch Project on Eddie Eds, Eddie Chats. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys, and until next time.